So I'm delighted to welcome our very first speaker, Martin Wright. Martin is chair of the inspirational magazine Positive News, which is UK magazine based in Scotland. And Martin will tell us a little about the work of the magazine, as well as giving us an introduction to what's going on in the UK with Impact Media. So welcome to you, Martin. Tell us about yourself and about Positive News and about UK Impact Media.
Thanks so much, Caroline, and hello, everybody. So yes, Positive News. It's a magazine, it's a website, it's a slew of social media initiatives across all the main social platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. And our focus is on good journalism about good stuff. What do we mean by that? Well, the sort of stuff we cover, it's inspiring stories of people creating change in their communities, initiatives tackling everything from knife crime and male violence to restoring wildflower meadows and reinvigorating local crafts. It's about inventors and entrepreneurs creating solutions to the climate crisis, which also lift people out of poverty and improve their quality of life in the here and now. That sort of stuff. Why is it needed? Well, I think the vast majority of mainstream journalism, and this has been my experience working basically as a journalist and editor about the last 30 years or so, the vast majority of that journalism focuses on bad stuff, on things going wrong. You know, for many journalists, it's not really news unless something's being blown up or somebody's being shown up. You know, the old phrase, if it bleeds, it leads. Now, we need journalism like that. We need to hold power to account, if you like. But I think if that's all that it does, it's actually giving a bit of a skewed view of the world, because it doesn't report on things getting better. Whether those are things getting better on the global scale, like, for example, the huge number of the huge reductions in the number of deaths from malaria among children in developing countries, the huge reductions in the number of people killed by typhoons in Bangladesh over the last 30 years, or whether it's stuff getting better on the local level, local initiatives like cuts in reoffending in an inner city due to community rehabilitation programs that just don't get the coverage they deserve. Unless you are covering that stuff as well as all the rubbish that's going on, as well as all the corruption that's going on, as well as all the war that is going on, then you're only presenting one side of the story. And it's a very dark side of the story. And if you're only presenting one side of the story, that's actually bad journalism. You're not doing your job as a journalist. And that's a problem in terms of the effect it has on your reader, on your viewer, because you just leave them feeling hit on the head by doom and gloom in a way that leaves them feeling they can do nothing about this stuff. It leaves them lacking a sense of agency. So that's what Positive News seeks to counter, I guess. To give a tiny bit of background, there have been two incarnations of Positive News. It was set up, first of all, in the early 90s by an individual as a little news sheet. It was quite idiosyncratic. It was funded by a single benefactor. She passed away. She handed on Positive News almost as a kind of deathbed gift to our current CEO, who was then working for her. Our current CEO is a great chap called Sean Dagan-Wood, and he had the vision and the imagination to reconfigure the idea of Positive News to be something that is owned by its readers. And to reinvigorate it financially, he set up a crowdfunder. He did a share offer, publicized on social media with the hashtag #OwnTheMedia, and set up a community benefit society, which is a form of cooperative, but it issues shares. And in the end, we had 1,500 people, 1,500 readers, supporters of Positive News who bought shares, and that effectively gave a platform to relaunch the magazine, and especially to build it out across all the social media, all the digital channels, which weren't available when it started off. So that's what it is. How it works, it's run by a very small team of 6 people, all of whom are part-time, apart from Sean, apart from the CEO. And it's overseen by a 5-strong board, including myself as chair. We are all unpaid. It's a completely voluntary commitment on our part. And we are answerable to our owners, to our 1,500 owners. Our funding, the way we make it work, where we make it just about wash its own face, is largely by subscriptions. We have just shy of 10,000 paying subscribers who get the print magazine, as well as access to all the digital material. The digital material is all available free. That's our present model. We have no firewalls. Everything's available for free. We also have something called Brands of Inspiration, which is a partnership scheme for organizations we are happy to take some money from to give them some branded profile. We make it clear that we've compiled material in association with them. And they are seen as prominent supporters of the magazine. Now, I've talked a little bit about it's a print magazine. It's a print magazine as well as a digital output. Why is this? Obviously, it's cheaper if you just do stuff digitally, if you don't have to incur the print and paper and distribution costs. For the moment, at any rate, the moment we like having a print magazine, it's tangible. It's something to hold. Look, I'll just pick one up here. Here's one we made earlier. It's tangible. It's something to hold. You can give it to people. It looks rather gorgeous, although I say so myself. The design, the production values are very high, and it's still easier, we find at the moment, to get people to pay for something that's physical, that's tangible. Interestingly enough, our demographic in terms of readers, a fair proportion of our print subscribers are millennials. There's an idea sometimes that it's only old people who like physical stuff, physical media. Young people prefer everything digital, everything virtual. I don't think that's true. After all, we're talking about a generation that will sometimes buy albums, they'll buy LPs, even though they don't have a record player, just to stick the cover on the wall. So I think that partly there is still an appeal of something physical. In terms of looking at the financial sustainability, which is something that as chair of the board, I'm always having to do, we are exploring a membership scheme separate from the share offer, which we've done. It's early days. It's very complicated actually trying to set up a really good membership scheme. A lot of people are doing it. The Guardian in the UK, for example, is well known for doing it. Lots of other magazines are doing it in one form or another, lots of other media. We are likely to go down that route. We're not there yet, but I think that's likely to be part of our funding future, part of our publishing identity in future. Just to give you a tiny bit of figures, as it were, I mentioned we've got about 10,000 print subscribers. We've got about 370,000 social media followers. So we've got a reasonably hefty readership. And in terms of unique visitors to the website, we have about 1.8 million annually. So we got a decent coverage, decent reach. We also do an email newsletter. We've got about 40,000 people signed up for the email newsletter. And we get about a 40% opening rate on that, which we're really, really pleased with, given how much stuff people get in their email inbox. So 40% of those who receive it actually opening it up and looking at it is quite encouraging. And that's also been quite a good source of print subscribers for us, people converting from newsletter to actually being subscribers. Financially, be absolutely straight with you, it's never easy. We just about wash our own face at the moment. We have to. We've got no enormously wealthy backers. Chance would be a fine thing. And interestingly, though, during the darkest days of COVID, our subscriber numbers went up quite noticeably. Because I think when times are really, really tough, people want to feel there's a better world out there. And if I may, Caroline, I'll just finish with a lovely little anecdote. We had an email from a nurse in the NHS, the National Health Service, during the early days of COVID, when the country was all locked down. And she said, have you by any chance got any spare back copies of the magazine? Because I've been taking mine into the room where the nurses and doctors relax, where they come briefly for a break in their shifts in the hospital. And people find it so encouraging to read this stuff. And so we sent her some spare copies, but also gave us an idea. And we reached out to NHS locations across the country. And we said, if you're at all interested in having copies of the magazine for your staff, for the hospitals, for the healthcare centres and so on, let us know. We got a really big response. So we did a crowdfunder among our readers and supporters, and we raised about 15,000, a little more than £15,000 of it, which we were able to put entirely to the costs of reprinting in some cases and distributing these copies out to the healthcare workers. And people were the feedback we got was so encouraging. It really made us feel, okay, people could be having a really tough time. They could be under a lot of stress. They could be struggling with a lot of stuff in their day-to-day lives, but they still sure as hell want to feel that there is a positive take on the world out there for them. So that really gave us a boost.
I wondered, do you ever get your stories into mainstream media? Because that's one of the things that I've noticed in India and the States, that some of the impact media platforms, whether it's rural Dalit women in India or the Black community in Philadelphia, they're getting their stories from their own impact media platforms into mainstream media sometimes. And because the journalists in mainstream media are obviously under pressure, as you said, to do negative stories, they don't have the researchers. So it's kind of almost like an easy way to get positive stories in. Do you try to do that, or is that not part of your purpose?
Yes, we do try to do it a bit. We do get people picking up on stories. To some extent, so that's quite nice when it happens. We also sometimes get stuff picked up. Well, we assume it's been picked up because the editorial approach is quite similar to the one we took, and it comes out, a month or 6 weeks or whatever after we did it. You can't always prove that. We did have one. I was told by somebody. I'm not going to say the title, but a very large UK-based mainstream media operation did launch a strand looking at a more positive view of the world. And in fact, they've stopped doing it now, but it ran for a couple of years. I won't give the name of the organization because I was told this in confidence. So I was told by somebody who worked there that basically positive news had been their inspiration for starting this thing themselves. But you have to be generous spirited in this business, because you very rarely get credit when people pick something up. So you have to just think quietly, I think that probably has something to do with us.
Yeah, interesting. That's great. And how do you measure social impact? And is that important for you? Because I'm also going to ask you about whether you get grant funding or whether you apply and don't get it. But one of the things that comes out again and again with all the people I talk to, both in the UK and in other countries, is the challenge of measuring social impact. We have that challenge at Together TV, where I'm chair, but we seem to have cracked it. Actually, our amazing team seem to have cracked it. What do you guys invest time, money in doing that? Or? We don't have
a lot of time or money to invest, to be honest, to be really blunt. So things such as that are really, really nice to have, but they're not an absolutely essential for producing the magazine and producing all the digital content. But I think to answer your question, there'd be a couple of ways of answering it. One is we have done reader surveys in the past. And although it is only anecdotal, a lot of this stuff actually is only anecdotal. You know, people draw statistical conclusions from something which is essentially qualitative rather than quantitative, I think, in this business quite a lot. And I think people have to be honest about that. But stories get picked up, we get feedback directly, people refer to the sort of things that they enjoy in the magazine. And on occasion, people will tell a story about, oh, I read this and I got in touch with so-and-so and we started doing that as well, whatever it might be, some sort of a community initiative or other. So to be honest, we don't have a lovely series of metrics saying, you know, 37.2% of people responded to this, and as a result, you know, 14 million pounds worth of something or other has happened directly as a result of positive news. And I would be rather skeptical of such claims if we ever made them. But I think we are assured that our ripples get out there. I think in an ideal world, it would be really lovely to have the funding to do something somewhat more rigorous and actually see, okay, how can we demonstrate that providing positive news to people triggers positive things to happen? And I'm sure we'd love to do that. And that is a piece of work which would require some kind of funding.
Yeah, well, one of my personal challenges to the UK funders, whether they're foundations or lottery or government or philanthropists, is to convince them to invest, to donate money to impact media platforms so that we can spend more money on impact measurement and on marketing and on those things that are the walls of the house, as David Floyd, who's going to speak later, talks about, rather than just the sort of decoration on the roof. And have you tried fundraising from foundations and philanthropists for any of your work, or is it something that you've not gone into?
A small amount, and we have on occasion received a small amount of funding. I think it's something we want to do more of, we want to get better at. And one of the reasons that it's enjoyable being part of this event for me is to find out more about what's out there. Because, you know, I would say this is share of positive news, but I think we do a great job. And I think the job we do is one that needs to be done better and more extensively, basically.
Well, the message I get constantly across the UK is that it's very, very, very hard to get grant funding to support the infrastructure of the organisation. So you can get it for projects training disadvantaged young people to become journalists, or you can get it for projects that are sort of on the side of your core business, but to get funding for your core business is very, very, very difficult. We were incredibly lucky at Together TV because we received funding from the Golden Bottle Trust to invest in new database, invest in building up our audience engagement. So we've been able to do that brilliantly. And if we hadn't had that core funding, it would have been very, very, very hard. And that now means that we have an amazing base from which we can not only prove our social impact better, but also start to perhaps raise funds from them as well.
I think it's an interesting challenge. I think it's an interesting challenge to funders, actually, because you're absolutely right. As with any walk of life, getting funding for core activities is extremely difficult. But in a way, the sort of things which a lot of your speakers you've got today are involved with, the sort of things that Positive News does, it's a project of itself, by itself, really. So you could imagine if there was a major media organization and they said, we're looking for funding to set up a positive news strand as a project, that's the sort of thing which might actually appeal to funders. But when you set things up and that's its whole identity, it might not always sort of tick the right boxes because it might be seen as you're asking for core funding. But in a way, your core is your project, as it were.
Yeah, and we need to do a big campaign here in the UK, all of us together, to convince funders that social impact media has amazing social impact and is much needed in this country. I just wanted to ask you one more question about local versus national, or even international, because I understand that Positive News is reaching outside the UK as well. I remember when we set up many years ago, when we set up the Community Channel as a national community TV channel, it's now called Together TV, some people said to us, why national? Why, community is local. You should just be doing local TV or things like that. Have you had any sort of other, do you think there are any pros and cons for Positive News of the fact that you are UK wide versus local? I mean, I do personally, I love Positive News. And by the way, I love your design. When my hard print copy of Positive News arrives through my door box, I get really excited to open it because it's so beautifully designed and produced, as are your digital newsletters as well. But anyway, going back, do you see for you at Positive News, having a UK-wide, if not an international platform, how does that really add value to local communities?
It's the strength of good examples, really. Somebody can be doing something in Yorkshire that somebody else in Cornwall would find hugely relevant to what they're up to. Similarly, people take inspiration. People can be running a community initiative in Tamil Nadu, and actually, although it might be a very different geographical and economic circumstance, people can get inspiration from the way it's run. So we see ourselves as an international magazine. We're a UK-based international magazine. So while the a considerable majority of our print subscribers are in the UK, an overall majority of our digital readers, and therefore overall majority of people who read Positive News, are from outside the UK. So sometimes if people are interested in the UK, but people read it in North America, people read it in India, people read it in Egypt, people read it in China. We've got a decent international coverage. And I think for some people reading it, it's not necessarily even obvious to them that this is a British magazine. So we do make certain assumptions in the magazine. We probably wouldn't say Yorkshire, UK in a story in the print magazine. But we also make sure that we write about stuff that's going on in a way that is not so culturally specific that somebody reading about an initiative in London, say, when they're reading it in India, would struggle to understand it.
Fantastic. Well, it'll be interesting for you to hear from some of our speakers later on who are doing similar projects in India and the States, such as the Better India, which is, again, an amazing positive news platform.
Yeah, it is.
Some of the new aggregator platforms, such as URL Media in the States. I'm really excited about collaborating across countries and learning from each other. On that note, Martin, is there anything else you wanted to add, or shall we move on to hear from Nafisa now?
I'm really keen to hear from the others now, Caroline. So that would be great. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being our first speaker at our first conference. We really look forward to working with you in future and showcasing your work to all our followers as well. So thank you, Martin. And now we'll move on to introducing Nafisa. Nafisa is the co-founder of Muslim Mamas, and I'm going to jump straight into Nafisa, who's going to tell us about why she got involved in Muslim Mamas, what it is, how she became the co-founder, and why it's important and inspiring. Okay, over to you, Nafisa. Good luck.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, everybody. Nice to see so many faces, and I'm looking forward to learning from you lots. So I'm Nafisa. I'm co-founder and strategic leader of Muslim Mamas. Muslim Mamas provides a network and multiple safe spaces at the fingertips of Muslim women globally to connect, inspire, share, and empower Muslim women seeking sisterhood and a support network. We're a global community of 250,000 people and a media platform for Muslim mothers to be educated, uplifted, and given an authentic, raw voice to the underrepresented Muslim woman by providing quality information, consultancy, networking, events, culturally sensitive content, and growth opportunities. We are currently working at government level on consultancy and various high impact campaigns, including topics such as cancer awareness and domestic abuse. We've also worked with many brands offering market research and awareness opportunities, as well as insights, and have achieved over 70% or more high-level engagement rates on focused activities. We do aspire to be the largest global network of Muslim mothers, enabling positive change and impact, becoming the go-to place for Muslim women sharing authentic experiences. So now I'm going to tell you a story of a young mother, barely aged 25 years old, when she gave birth to her first child and faced the unspoken challenges that go with the experiences of motherhood. With her firstborn, Nargis Jahan Uddin had a very difficult pregnancy that required several hospitalizations and uncertainty as to whether the pregnancy will remain viable. In that first year of motherhood, she couldn't understand why she'd felt so numb all the time, why she wasn't feeling the joys and wonders of motherhood, and that she'd always imagined that she'd feel. She was with her son every single day, and she knew she loved him deeply, but why wasn't she connecting with him? Why was she scared of all the things around her? Coming from a hectic life of studying and focusing on her career, it felt like her whole world had shrunk into the body of that tiny baby. She rarely went out, and her every action or conversation revolved around the care of her child. She rarely saw anyone, and all her friends and family were working. She was sad all the time, and she felt completely isolated, trapped, and alone. In January 2011, Nargis Jahan randomly posted a photo of a sleeping baby with his bum in the air and on her hardly used Facebook profile. It was a moment of sheer frustration, exhaustion, and a deep sense of loneliness that propelled her to do this. Within an hour, this experience connected so many of her friends from the various stages of her life all across the world who shared their experiences of their children and their sleeping habits. Suddenly, for the first time, being a first-time mom didn't feel so lonely anymore. Friends from different points in her life suddenly reconnected with her on the one thing they now shared in common: motherhood. This wealth of shared experience, knowledge, and prayers not only connected her, but it also felt like it had validated her. It was this moment that led Nargis to create Muslim Mamas by hitting the create button on Facebook. She invited 100 of her own friends by then and invited her friends, and so it grew. It was her son's bum that launched thousands of mums and became symbolic of her time of need, her cry for help. She could post at 3 a.m. whilst awake and alone, and she knew there was always someone there to reply. There was always someone there with her. Muslim Mamas was the cord that connected Nargis and pulled her out of the dark reverie that she now recognizes as postnatal depression, where she'd felt so disconnected from motherhood, so disconnected from her own baby even, to being thrown what felt like a lifeline by connecting this community at her fingertips. It also became many other mamas' lifeline, quite literally, as you'll hear now. So that's how I came to be involved in becoming a member of Muslim Mamas, and then an admin, and subsequently a co-founder. After being a member of Muslim Mamas for nearly 2 years, in 2014, I got a call from one of the admins then asking me to help with a domestic abuse survivor escape with her young children and to help find her shelter, as her then husband was encouraging her to poison herself. It was now or never. One of the stories that will remain with us forever is this anonymous sister who used to post every month or so. Nargis used to handle the anonymous posts at that time. With each post, the abuse she received at the hands of her husband got worse and worse. She told Nargis that she deleted her messages because he would check her phone, and she didn't know what he would do if he found out that she was talking. Muslim Mamas was her only safe space to speak. She tolerated so much, including physical abuse, rape, constant emotional abuse, her children being turned against her, being hit whilst being pregnant and breastfeeding, being sworn at, and so much more. No matter how much Mama supported her on the platform, we knew that she would need to make that first step, and that would have to come from her, not us. One day, she messaged Nargis saying that he had tried to encourage her to take poison and commit suicide. He told her the world would be a better place if she took it, and she actually considered it and believed him. That's how much he had reduced her state of mind. That's the day that she decided to take action. For the sake of her children, she called the police and reached out to us, and that's when I got the call. We had to now be part of an escape plan to help this mama escape from a volatile and dangerous situation. Admin needed me to call my father to help her find accommodation, as he had access to various organizations in Birmingham. And admin managed to drive her and her two very young children to a safe place and find emergency accommodation that she so desperately needed. All of that propelled us to realize that this platform needed more than the Facebook community. We needed to be an organization. We needed to showcase our mama's stories, and we needed to find a place that it's public and everybody can hear it. So our 10-year last year anniversary, we marked that occasion with launching our MuslimMamas.com, where we now represent Muslim mamas' raw voices in their own words. We also have other channels such as a podcast. We've got a VIP lounge where we provide opportunities for education and courses for our mamas to benefit from and also to upskill themselves. In terms of the immediate platform itself, so although we didn't envision it to be at the next BBC, we did envision it to be a parenting space like Mumsnet or Bounty, where you have a global network for Muslim mothers. They're often looked as undermined and misrepresented, and yet they are powerful vehicles that propel society. So creating this safe space on our website would help express their voices, would show their diversity, intelligence, and validity in what they were saying that the world in general was not really hearing. So our website is now the public face of our closed spaces, and we will represent the authentic Muslim women's voices in these places by providing courses, training for them. They could upskill themselves, be empowered, and be able to just even get a qualification or change their careers. I'd like to conclude by emphasizing the need that we do have to represent underrepresented women's voices by sharing their stories, by empowering them, by giving them a voice. In order to do this, media platforms need to be scalable, need to have scalable opportunities, as otherwise the impact isn't as far and wide. Why is it that despite all the work that we did in lockdown with our mamas was never heard in the mainstream media or recognized? By having more platforms that amplify these stories, word will get out. We need to have these we need to own these conversations. I founded a podcast channel, Not Another Mum Pod, under the Muslim Mamas umbrella for this very reason. I wanted to have honest and candid conversations. We hear mainstream writing about Muslim women and talking about us for us all the time. I thought, why not grab the mic from them and let us talk about us, our lives, what we go through firsthand in our own words? Why don't we start that conversations ourselves and start talking about these issues that our community likes to brush under the carpet and figure out a solution for ourselves? I feel enough is enough. If we want our voices heard, we need to be the ones making the change and ensure that there are plenty of these platforms where we can be heard, and we have to create these opportunities ourselves.
Nafisa, that was fantastic. Bravo, bravo, bravo. And I love some of your phrases like, why not grab the mic? And we've got to be the ones to make our voices heard. Really, really inspirational. So questions to Nafisa and also to Martin, please, about anything you've heard or about, and also about the general thing about the importance of scaling. Has anybody got any questions? Because if not, there'll be plenty of other times. So Rizu sent congratulations, Nafisa, on your growth and amazing work.
Thank you very much.
Nafisa, I've got a question for you,
Sure.
which is, you've just recently won the amazing Facebook incubator.
That's right.
Prize so that they will train you and scale you up. How much is Facebook going to be your platform, and how much is your website going to be your platform, or your podcast, or anything else? What, I think that's something that we all struggle with. Which platforms should we prioritize, and how can we find the money to prioritize all these different platforms?
A really good question, because that's exactly what we're doing on the Facebook right now. One of our initiatives is to develop a multi-channel strategy. So I wouldn't say just focus on one platform and don't do another. If you can, just try and build as many platforms as you can, as many channels as you can. When we had that social media shutdown, when Facebook went down and the whole world went a bit crazy for that 1 hour, everyone, a Muslim Mamas community, could go straight onto the website, onto our VIP channel, and they were communicating on our private rooms there. So it's not like we had a disconnect as such. And that's when we realized more than ever that you should have your own space, whether Instagram, Facebook, podcast, they're all different mediums, but have your own space that you own, that you can control as well. So I think websites are definitely the way to go to make sure you have that. But social media is so powerful now.
Thanks, Nafisa. There's a question from Padma, who's in
Sure.
Bengaluru.
Sure.
Who's going to speak to us later. Do you have a WhatsApp channel, and did you consider that, or Telegram or Signal?
No, we intentionally avoided that. And the reason why, and we actually have a blanket rule on that. We don't allow WhatsApp groups on our safe spaces simply because it's not that safe. We don't know whose numbers are being passed around. We've got a lot of cases where women are vulnerable. We can't allow that kind of safety compromise, and we don't want to be responsible for anything that might happen as a result. But when it's on our safe spaces, you know, it's fine. We can monitor and we can also support them as and when.
Thank you. That's great. And I've got one quick question, which is,
Sure.
actually, there's other questions coming through. So from Rizwana, media monitoring, how do you monitor, mediate conversations with the new online safety harms bill platforms such as Facebook? We'll have to monitor content. And have you got examples where that's got out of control? And then a similar question, well, not similar, but another question from Grace at the Bureau of Investigative Journalism in London, which is doing amazing work. And she wants to know how much your growth is coming from the community itself, and how much they're a tool for growing your audience beyond.
Yeah. So the first question, in terms of you know, adhering to Facebook standards, etc. Facebook is really clear in terms of the violations that you have. They have really good standards that you need to follow. And even though best will of the world, we can't control every single post that comes through, and we might not get that quite quality information. That might be fake news and etc. etc. It does get a violation tick, and Facebook tools also monitor that back end. But we also have an active admin. We've got active moderators who are monitoring the conversations. Members themselves can report on the Facebook tools. They can report comments that are not appropriate or information that's being passed that's not really verified. So there's a lot of work that goes on in the back end of things, and we haven't really caused any major violations at this stage, despite being, you know, going for what, 10 years now. Yeah. And Grace, you asked if, in terms of whether the growth comes from the community itself. Yeah, 100%. The members are always inviting each other. They will be recommending us. And in fact, Muslim Mamas was a secret group for the first few years because we couldn't cope with the waiting list and the number of vetting that we do as mamas are being added. So we were secret, and it was invite only. So we actually grew invite only. We've got currently 24,000 members in our main group. We've got 130,000 on our main Facebook page. In our public spaces, 18,000 on Instagram. So yeah, most of it is coming from the content that we're providing, but also members, adding members.
Nafisa, there's so many questions. We could spend hours talking to you. I think we'll come back to you if you can stay on a bit longer.
No problem, I'll be here.
I put next in the agenda just to talk to you a little bit about my findings from the Churchill fellowship that I did, and I'm going to whiz through those because the talk is much more interesting in a way. I went on the Churchill fellowship to look specifically at funding models and organizational structures in the US and India, and to see what people were doing to grow and scale impact media. In summary, I found that across those two countries, those continents, impact media is a really, really powerful force for good. It's very vital in those countries, much more than in the UK, and it's a powerful driver of social change. The other thing that I found was that the vast amount of funding, income rather, coming into impact media in the States and in India is a mixture of huge amounts of individual contributions, donations, community shares, membership, subscription, all sorts of different kinds of individual contributions, plus big support from foundations, philanthropists, and impact investors, which we just don't see in the UK, and a growing movement towards commercial income. But fundamentally, individuals, huge amounts of money from individuals and huge amounts of money from foundations. My third major finding was how entrepreneurial and flexible the people running, founding, managing impact media were. They have non-profits, they have for-profits, they have charities, they have businesses, they have everything there. And what's great is that the funders, whether it's India or in the States, they're not saying, oh, you're not a registered charity, so we can't give you any money. Or they're not saying, oh, you're for profit, so we can't invest in you. Or they're saying we can't, they are very, very flexible about focusing on the core purpose and the social impact of these platforms, and not worrying enormously about the structure or the governance even, or I would say, can't wait to hear from Vince in the States about this. But that's what I found nearly everywhere I went: less rigid, more flexible, more entrepreneurial. And I would love to see that here, because I know that some of you in the audience, George Brock, for example, we've all of us, we've come up against enormous blocks if we're not a particular kind of structure here. So my recommendations for the UK in summary are: one, we need to come together to inspire foundations, the lottery distributors, philanthropists, and impact investors to support impact media, not just independent news, but also platforms that are storytelling platforms, photography, magazines, podcasts, etc. And key to that support that we need to get is support for core funding, for things like a database or technical costs or the manager's costs or the marketeer's costs. We'll hear from some of the others in a minute about that. Secondly, my recommendation is that we should try and grow individual contributions to impact media in the UK. We should try and invest in growing donations or community shares or membership models, or even social entrepreneur models where you're selling mugs and t-shirts or something more practical, and subscriptions as well. We should be thinking, how can we do this? How can we scale this in the UK? How can we learn from America and India to do this? And we'll need infrastructure costs supported for that. Thirdly, how can we become more entrepreneurial and flexible and develop different structures of ownership and governance? And how can we persuade our partners, funders, supporters that it's fine to do that? Can we, for example, have a mix of 2 or 3 different companies within one brand, one charitable, one non-charitable? And how can we build the technology to support what we're doing as well? My fourth recommendation is that we need to get much, much better, all of us, at telling our impact story, at measuring, evaluating, celebrating that impact story, and really create that cycle of people recognizing the impact that we're having and therefore wanting to support us as individuals or as institutions, or buying our goods or whatever. We need to inspire the support and the sustainability that we want to have. And my fifth recommendation is that we really do build a network of specialist infrastructure. Again, in America, in the States particularly, but also in India, I was so wowed by the support structures that are there. All sorts of different kinds of support structures for impact media, including dedicated foundations that are just funding media, but also training, connections, networking, advice, match funding, campaigns, branding, loads of stuff. We could do that here as well. And we're trying to do it here, but we can do it more and we can do it better. A big thank you to the Churchill Fellowship. I really recommend you all trying to get a Churchill Fellowship, an amazing opportunity, and also to the Rank Foundation, who helped support my fellowship as well. And to all the organizations and people that I visited on my travels. So there's a question from Rizu: is there a crossover between impact media and public interest news? For me, impact media is the wider whole movement of this stuff. So including public interest news, including photography projects, video, storytelling, everything. And I resist just focusing on news, because I think news is one thing, but all the storytelling is a way to access more people sometimes. And I'll talk about that another time a bit more. Other questions, comments? I've got a quick question for Nafisa. Nafisa, if you could just tell us, are you getting any funding at the moment from anyone?
Yeah, so as part of the Facebook Accelerator program, the whole point about that is they will assess our social impact and they will help support that. And we also, receive funding from Global Giving, which I've already secured $50,000 to begin with. And we have further funding opportunities after demo day at the end of March, where we will be pitching to investors and funders alike. And we do sustain ourselves. We work with, like I said, we work with the government agencies at the moment, and we have some sustainability, but I think we can't scale at that level, and we really need to think about how we're going to secure our future.
Thank you. And there's a question from Claire to say, do you mean Impact Media generally, Claire? Claire, why didn't you ask your question? Where are you? You unmute and ask your question.
I was just wondering if, generally speaking, if impact media organisations have ever or would ever do a co-production with a standard production company on the Wright project and or with a broadcaster or streamer.
Does anybody want to answer that question, Claire? A very important question. I can answer it, but I'd be interested to hear from other people.
We've talked of it. It's not been able to come to fruition at the moment. It's always rather tricky, as I'm sure you know, but it's always an idea in think, as it were.
Great. And Grace has said she can answer to have an answer on this one. I've also got my opinions too on this one, as you can imagine. Grace, over to you. Lovely to hear from you, and then we'll break.
Hello. Hi, thanks very much. Yeah, I'm from the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, and we are an impact-driven, mission-driven organisation, and we work very much in a partnership model where we do investigations into areas of public interest, such as global health. I'm from the environment team, finance and so on. And then once our story is at a certain stage, we approach different partners for it. So we've worked with BBC News, with ITV News, with a prominent partner in Mexico when we were doing a story about oxygen. So we're quite sort of driven by the story that we have and the impact we want to achieve with it. And so we do make those partnerships and actually use them quite strategically in order to reach different audiences and bring about the kind of change that we want to see from journalism. Yes, I will post a link in the chat.
Grace, thank you so much. That's really, really interesting. And what you do at the Bureau is absolutely amazing. I'm just wowed by it.